I should have trusted my gut when she asked me to come. Haley had brought up this corporate event 2 weeks before it happened. One of those rooftop soirees her company loved to throw after a big quarter. "You should come to this one," she said casually, standing at the kitchen sink while rinsing strawberries. "Just for an hour. Everyone always asks why you never show." It didn't feel like pressure at the time, just a suggestion. But when I gave my usual answer, "Do you really want me there, or do you just feel like you should invite me?" she paused a little too long. She didn't answer directly, just smiled and said, "It'd be nice, that's all." So I went. I told myself I was being supportive, that maybe this would be good for us. I hadn't been to any of her work events since she got promoted and transferred to the downtown office 6 months earlier, so maybe that was starting to look bad. I figured it was the least I could do. Show my face, be a present husband, nod along to small talk with strangers whose names I'd forget within minutes. I even ironed my shirt twice. The lounge was on the rooftop of a high-rise in the center of the city. Swanky place, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, low golden lighting, and that kind of ambient music that feels expensive because no one's ever heard it before. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of wine and finger food, all of it too delicate to satisfy hunger but perfect for looking sophisticated. When I walked in, she didn't see me right away. I scanned the room for a few minutes, dodging handshakes and forced smiles from people I didn't recognize. There were a lot of them. Haley's company had exploded in size this year. She used to name every coworker like they were characters in a sitcom. Lately, it was just meetings with the team and calls with the department. Then I saw her. She was by the bar, half turned toward the city view, laughing at something. Her laugh was loud, not obnoxious, just that specific kind of uninhibited that used to be mine. She wore the dress I'd told her once made her look like a Bond girl. Deep green, sharp neckline, subtle shimmer that caught the light every time she moved. I wanted to smile, to feel proud. That's my wife, I should have thought. But my breath caught before the feeling could land. She was holding someone's hand. Not accidentally, not a casual touch. She was standing there with her fingers interlaced with his, thumb gently brushing the side of his hand like she'd done it 100 times before. My brain struggled to process it. It was too deliberate to misread, but too out of place to fully believe. I just froze, mid-step, heart skipping, stomach tightening, trying to catch up to what I was seeing. The man she was with, tall, younger, confident posture, turned slightly toward her, and I watched as she leaned in and said something that made him smile. Then she turned and saw me. I'll never forget what happened next. She laughed. She actually laughed. Dropped his hand like it was nothing, took a sip of her drink, and walked straight toward me like the moment I had just witnessed hadn't happened at all. "Owen," she said brightly, arms out like we hadn't seen each other in months. "You came." She hugged me, warm, familiar, but quick. She kissed my cheek, not my lips, and pulled back too fast for it to mean anything. My hands rested on her hips for a second longer than she expected, and I felt the tension in her body. That subtle tightening, like she wasn't sure how this scene was supposed to go now. Before I could say a word, she turned to him. "This is Milo," she said. "He's on my project team. Milo, this is my husband, Owen." "Milo." He gave me a smile, polite, practiced, and extended a hand. "Nice to finally meet you," he said, like he knew more about me than I wanted him to. I shook his hand, said something forgettable. "I think it was nice to meet you too," and watched Haley tuck a strand of hair behind her ear in that way she always did when she was nervous but didn't want anyone to notice. She looked distant, not embarrassed, not caught, just emotionally elsewhere. After a few minutes of awkward chit-chat about the weather and how fast the quarter had gone by, she said something about needing to check in with her boss and gently steered me toward the appetizer table like I was being babysat. And then she disappeared into the crowd with Milo in tow. I stood there, chewing a cracker topped with something unidentifiable, replaying the hand-holding in my head like it was a movie I couldn't pause. Every second I'd been watching them looped in slow motion, the way she smiled at him, the familiarity in their body language, the comfort, and that laugh, that effortless laugh right after being caught, like it was all just a funny misunderstanding. I stayed another 40 minutes, just long enough to avoid making a scene. I talked to some guy in accounting who wouldn't stop bragging about his crypto investments. I drank one cocktail too fast. I tried to find her again, but she was always on the far side of the room, laughing with people I didn't know. We didn't leave together. She was staying late to help clean up. I drove home alone, rolled down the window even though it was cold, and tried to talk myself out of what I'd seen. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was just a weird, misread moment. But I couldn't get rid of the feeling in my chest, the hollowness, like something had shifted. Later that night I asked her, not aggressively, just gently, "Who is Milo, really?" She blinked like I'd asked what time it was. "He's on the project team. I told you. I saw you two at the bar." She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" "You were holding hands, Haley." Her laugh returned, this time more annoyed than amused. "Oh my God. Seriously? That?" We were in the middle of a joke. He was telling this dumb story about a new client initiative and I had to pretend to be interested. It was nothing. "You were holding hands." She rolled her eyes. "Owen, come on. It wasn't romantic, if that's what you're thinking. God, you're acting like I kissed him or something." "No, you didn't act like you got caught, either." That stopped her for half a second, just long enough to show on her face. Then the walls went up again. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "I invited you to support me, not to get paranoid." I didn't respond. I didn't have the words. The feeling in my chest had gone from hollow to heavy, and I realized she wasn't denying it happened. She just wanted me to believe it didn't mean anything. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the moment kept replaying. Her thumb brushing over his hand. The laugh. The hug that didn't feel like home. The introduction that felt rehearsed. The whole thing was just a little too smooth. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something I hadn't dared admit to myself before. I didn't trust what she was saying, because I'd seen what she was doing. After the event, things didn't return to normal. We didn't fight about it, not exactly. Haley acted like the conversation about Milo never happened. Like we closed the book on a weird misunderstanding and moved on. She carried on like always, smiling when she kissed me goodbye in the morning, sending me quick check-ins during the day, asking if I wanted Thai or pizza on Friday. And for a while I tried to match her tone. I tried to believe her, but my mind wouldn't let it go. Because once you spot the crack, you start noticing how far it runs. The first thing I realized was how often her phone was in her hand. Haley used to leave it lying around without a second thought. It sat on the kitchen counter while she cooked, on the coffee table when we watched TV, even next to me in bed when she dozed off mid-scroll. Now, it was always on her, always face down, always silent. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that maybe I was just paranoid, stuck in the aftershock of that rooftop scene. But then came the patterns, the ones I couldn't ignore. Like how she suddenly started going to new fitness clubs I'd never heard of before. She used to do yoga in the mornings, routine, predictable, the kind of thing she scheduled on the fridge calendar. But now she'd come home late 2 or 3 times a week, claiming she'd gone to spin or kickboxing or some new instructor that you wouldn't like. I asked her once where this new studio was, and she hesitated, just for a second. Then she said, "It's near that cafe you hate. The one that uses those tiny chairs." And I smiled, nodded, pretended I knew what she meant. But there is no cafe with tiny chairs. I would have remembered. There were other things, too. Little ones like the way she started changing right when she got home. Used to be sweats or one of my old hoodies. Now she'd shower immediately and throw on something casual but polished, like she was still halfway in professional mode. She wore perfume on Tuesdays. That was new. And then there were the business trips. They started 2 months after she moved into the new department. Haley used to joke that her job barely justified going across town, let alone out of state. But now she was flying out at least once a month: Chicago, Austin, Denver. Never overnight, always just long enough to meet the client and fly back. She said the new management team was big on face-to-face. The first time, I didn't question it. The second time, I asked if she wanted help packing. The third time, I noticed she didn't take her laptop, just a small carry-on and her phone charger. When I asked about it, she blinked, then said she was going light because everything's in the cloud now, babe. Cloud or not, I'd never seen her so vague about work before. Haley used to vent about every meeting, every annoying coworker, every time the coffee machine broke. But now, she only spoke in broad strokes. The new VP's intense. We're prepping for Q3. There's a lot of restructuring. What kind of restructuring? What kind of clients? What was her actual role now? I didn't know, because every time I asked, she got slippery. She'd answer a different question, or smile and say, "You'd be bored with the details." She never used to think I'd be bored. I told myself I was being unfair, that relationships go through phases, that work gets stressful and people need space. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living next to someone who'd started building a second life just out of reach. One night, around 11, she was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move toward it. But I saw the name flash. D. Green. Just that. An initial and a last name. Not a contact saved with a photo or emoji like her girlfriends or coworkers. Just plain and clinical. The name sat on the screen for a moment, then disappeared as the notification faded. I stood there staring at the darkened screen, heart in my throat, because I knew that name. I had heard it in passing once, in a story she told weeks ago. Something about a guy helping onboard new accounts. A contractor, she said. Just temporary. I asked about him then, casually. Who's that guy, Green? You mentioned him before. She didn't even look up from her laptop. Just some contractor they brought in, she said. I barely even talked to him, but he texted at 11 p.m. while she was in the shower. And now, she carried her phone with her every time she left a room. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the fan spin and repeat like a slow metronome. She was asleep beside me, turned away, one arm curled under her pillow. I remember watching the soft rise and fall of her back, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that I was insecure, that this was just what stress looked like. But somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was something else. A shift, a change in her posture, in her gaze, in the way she kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Slightly rushed, slightly distracted, like she had a meeting she couldn't be late for, or someone she couldn't leave waiting. It all added up to a shape I didn't want to name. I started watching her more closely, not to catch her in a lie, but to figure out if she was still here, with me, in this life we built, or just pretending to be. And the thing that hit the hardest wasn't the distance, it was how comfortable she seemed with it. Like she'd already said goodbye, and forgot to tell me. There's a moment, one moment, when the switch flips, when you stop doubting yourself and start hunting for the truth. For me, it happened on a Tuesday night. Haley had another strategy dinner. That was the word she used. Strategy. It sounded important, legitimate, almost clinical, like she was building a presentation or restructuring someone's quarter. But I knew better by then. The words were just decals over a cracked wall. She left just after 6 p.m., kissed me on the cheek, and told me not to wait up. Her voice was light, her outfit not quite formal but practiced. Hair curled just enough. Lipstick sharp. When she shut the door behind her, it didn't feel like a wife leaving for work. It felt like a magician disappearing behind a curtain. And I sat on the couch for exactly 9 minutes before I stood up, walked into our shared office, and opened her laptop. It wasn't locked. It never was. And that made it worse, somehow. This wasn't about a password anymore. This wasn't about access. It was about how easy she'd made it for me to find the truth, because she assumed I'd never look. My hands shook a little, not because I was scared of what I'd find, but because I already knew. I wasn't hoping for innocence anymore. I was preparing for confirmation. I clicked open her email, and I typed just one word into the search bar. Hotel. 5 results. All from the last 3 months. Each one had a confirmation number. Each one was for a different date. All of them were midweek bookings, and every single one listed 2 guests. My mouth went dry. I clicked on the earliest one. It was for a boutique hotel on the east side, the kind of place you don't pick for convenience but for ambience. The kind with velvet headboards, complimentary Prosecco, and mood lighting. The second one was 2 days before that rooftop event. The most recent was last week. All under her name, all with her email, all hiding in plain sight. I stared at the screen, trying to steady my breathing, but my chest was tight and hot, like someone had strapped a belt around my ribs and kept tightening it with every click. I opened her work calendar next. I had access. She once shared it with me during a hectic holiday season, so I'd know when she was available. I never thought to remove the permissions. That same day, the night of the most recent hotel reservation, her calendar read, "Dinner with D. Green Q2 Planning." D. Green. The same name that flashed across her phone screen while she was in the shower. The one she said was just a contractor. I stared at those words for a long time. Dinner with D. Green. At a hotel. 2 guests. That was the moment. That's when everything that used to be deniable, her phone habits, the sudden trips, the late nights, the careful distance, collapsed into something undeniable. This wasn't a flirtation. This wasn't a moment of confusion or a phase or a mistake she hadn't acted on. This was a parallel relationship, a replacement life, and I'd been living on the outside of it for months. I should have stopped there, but I didn't, couldn't. There was a folder on her desktop named Q3 Initiative. I clicked it open and scanned the files, project briefs, slide decks, spreadsheets. It all looked like normal work stuff at first glance. But buried at the bottom was a subfolder called Drafts. Inside were half-written messages, emails she never sent. One was addressed to M. Just the letter. It started like this. "I can't stop thinking about how calm I feel when I'm with you. Not excited. Not nervous. Just safe. Like I've stepped into a version of myself I forgot existed." Another one said, "I hate feeling like the villain, but you're the only thing that feels honest right now." Another, "He's not a bad man. He's just predictable. I know everything he'll say before he says it. Sometimes I pretend to be surprised. And then, with you I feel awake, like I've been sleepwalking and finally opened my eyes." My eyes blurred. I couldn't tell if it was rage or heartbreak. Probably both. She had rewritten our life into a story she told herself while she reached for something newer, shinier, more exciting. She wasn't just drifting. She was rewriting history. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a placeholder in her version of events. The background character in the love story she was scripting with someone else. The final draft in the folder was saved under a different name. It looked like a resignation letter at first. But as I read, I realized it was something else entirely. "If you say the word, I'll walk. I'll leave it all behind. I just need to know you mean it." I closed the laptop, sat in the chair for a long time, and I just stared at the wall. At a framed photo of us from 3 years ago, taken on a hike, both of us sweaty and sunburned, smiling like idiots because we'd made it to the top. I looked at that photo, and I realized that version of us didn't exist anymore. Maybe it hadn't in a long time. She hadn't just drifted. She had decided. She had made a choice and was waiting to see if he'd make one too. And me? I was the variable. The guy she didn't want to hurt, but also didn't want to save. That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat in the dark with her laptop in front of me and thought about every moment I had ignored. The changed passwords, the vague stories, the forced laughs. I thought about the way she used to touch me absent-mindedly while we watched TV. How that had stopped. How she never reached for my hand anymore. I thought about how easily she had introduced him at that party. How she'd laughed when I caught her. How she acted like it was all just a funny scene in a harmless play. But it wasn't harmless. And it wasn't a joke. It was real. It was betrayal, rehearsed and refined and wrapped in polite language so I wouldn't notice the dagger. But now I had the blade in my hands. And for the first time in this entire unraveling, I wasn't confused anymore. I was sure. You don't plan these moments. You just wake up one morning and decide. Today, I need to see it for myself. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't rehearse a confrontation. I didn't even know where she'd be. Not exactly. But I had enough breadcrumbs. She'd mentioned a team dinner the night before. Casual after work, some new restaurant her department wanted to try. The kind of thing she said I wouldn't like. You hate loud places. She tossed over her shoulder while applying mascara. But I checked her calendar again. Same entry. Dinner with D. Green Strat. Rollout review. Dinner. With him. I booked a table at the restaurant ahead of time, under a different name. Told the host I wanted privacy. Asked if I could be seated near the back wall. He nodded politely, guided me to a corner booth half hidden behind a large partition of decorative ferns and sculpted wood. From there, I could see just enough of the main dining area to watch without being watched. I got there early, sat with water and a menu I didn't read. My heart beat fast but steady, like I was preparing for a speech I didn't plan to give. She arrived 15 minutes later. I saw her before she saw anyone else. She stepped through the revolving door like it was a stage entrance. Shoulders back, hair pinned, heels clicking softly across the marble floor. She wore the dress she once called too much for work. A deep wine red, silky, sleeveless, and cut just enough to say this night wasn't about spreadsheets. Her lipstick matched. Her eyes scanned the room casually, but I saw it, the faint flicker of anticipation. Like she was looking for someone specific. And she found him. Milo. Of course it was him. He stood from the bar, jacket already off, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. The two of them smiled the way people do when they've been waiting for the moment all day. No hesitation, no nerves, just chemistry in motion. They didn't sit across from each other. They sat side by side, same side of the booth. No coat barrier, no professional distance. He ordered wine for the table. She didn't even open the menu. They were talking softly, closely, and I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the comfort in their silence. The little shared smiles between topics, the casual touches, her hand brushing against his knee when she laughed. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a little guilt in her expression, maybe a flicker of worry, but there was none of that. She looked alive, not performative, not tense, just herself, fully present, fully with him. Halfway through the meal, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. My stomach dropped before it even opened. Haley laughed, like she already knew what it was. He said something. She nodded. He opened the box and held it out. It was a bracelet, thin, delicate, gold with a small circular charm. It wasn't flashy, but I knew it wasn't cheap. And she didn't hesitate. She didn't pull away or laugh it off like it was too much. She held out her wrist, palm up, and waited while he fastened it. His fingers moved like he'd done it before. And when he finished, she looked at the bracelet like it meant something, like it mattered. She didn't take it off. That was the moment. Not the wine, not the dress, not the booth seat too close to be casual. The bracelet, because it meant permanence. It wasn't a night. It was a symbol. I couldn't hear their voices, but I didn't need to. Her body language told the entire story. How her shoulder leaned into his when she laughed. How he brushed a crumb from her lip without apology. How they paused when their eyes locked, like the world faded behind them. She didn't act like a woman who was cheating. She acted like a woman who had chosen. And the worst part? I wasn't even part of the choice. I wasn't the man being replaced. I was the man already gone. I should have left then. But I stayed. Not out of masochism. Not to punish myself. But because part of me wanted to make sure it was real. That this wasn't just some elaborate misunderstanding with an unfortunate angle or a misinterpreted gesture. It wasn't. It was exactly what I feared. By dessert, she was twirling the charm between her fingers like it was a habit she'd always had. He paid the check. She touched his wrist before he stood. And when they walked out, they didn't part at the door. They left together. I stayed seated for a long time. The waiter came by to clear the untouched plate in front of me. "Would you like anything else, sir?" he asked gently. I shook my head. Then I looked at my reflection in the window next to me. The lighting was dim, but I could see just enough. I looked tired, older. worn down in ways I hadn't noticed. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel lost. I felt done. She was already gone. And I had been holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. I left a tip, thanked the host, and walked into the night. The wind hit my face harder than I expected. It helped, like something shaking me awake. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for an hour, hands loose on the wheel, heart silent. Not broken, just quiet, like it had finally run out of questions. I parked near an overlook and stared at the city lights for a while. Somewhere out there, she was probably in the middle of a new version of our life. One that didn't include me. And I realized something that changed everything. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't hiding. She was thriving. Because for her, this wasn't betrayal. It was escape. And that bracelet, that was her line in the sand. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't been tempted. She had already crossed over. And she wasn't coming back. After that night, I stopped hoping. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't press for explanations or pretend we still shared the same story. Something inside me had gone quiet. Not in a numb way, but in a settled way. Like a storm that finally hit shore and realized there was nothing left to destroy. She came home late. I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I heard her heels click down the hall, the soft rustle of her dress as she moved through the closet, the faucet running while she removed her makeup. Then the familiar weight of her body settling into bed beside me. I didn't turn toward her. She didn't turn toward me. That was the last night I ever laid beside her as her husband in spirit. From that moment on, I was someone else. Someone watching from the shore while she disappeared into deeper water. But I wasn't about to drown. The next morning, I made 2 stops. First, to a storage unit I'd almost forgotten about. A place I hadn't visited since before we got married. It was where I kept old tax records, business files from my first freelance jobs, and one fireproof safe my cousin had helped me lug up a narrow stairwell years ago. I'd stored it there back when I thought my small side hustle might become something, and I needed secure off-site backups. As he put it, took me 15 minutes to dig through the dust and find the right key. Inside the safe, there it was, the prenup, the very one Haley had insisted on when we got engaged. I remember how awkward those conversations were back then. I had just landed a few big clients, and my income was on the rise. She'd made it clear it wasn't about money, it was about security, about being smart. "I don't want anything from you," she said at the time. "I just want us to both feel protected." And I'd believed her. To her credit, she didn't fight when I suggested it. In fact, she brought it up before I could. She was the one who brought in the lawyer. She was the one who pushed for specific clauses. One clause stood out now like a neon sign. Infidelity voids claim to joint property or future earnings. I remember how she'd shrugged at that line. "Well, we'll never need it," she said almost playfully. Maybe she believed that back then. But I hadn't forgotten. I took the document, locked the safe, and drove to my second stop. A lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The one who helped my business structure its first partnership agreement. A quiet, meticulous guy named Harris who didn't talk much but knew how to *p***nize a comma in legal text. He looked over the prenup for 20 minutes in silence. When he finally spoke, it was with the calm certainty of someone who saw a clear path through a battlefield. "This is enforceable," he said, "assuming you can prove it." "I can," I told him. "Emails, calendar logs, hotel confirmations, photos if it comes to that." He nodded once. "Then we begin the process immediately." That word, process, was both terrifying and comforting. Because for the first time in this entire unraveling, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. Harris helped me draft the initial filings. We didn't send anything yet. That part had to be timed. But I began the quiet work of untangling the life we'd built together. And I discovered something else. She never checked. When we got married, we moved into the house I had bought 6 months prior. It wasn't huge, but it was ours, or at least that's what she thought. She talked about our mortgage and our equity like it was mutual. But the deed had remained in my name. She never asked to have it added. She trusted me, just like I had trusted her. I contacted the property manager, updated the insurance, and changed some of the back-end account details. All perfectly legal, all above board, all well within my rights. I made sure her name didn't appear on anything it didn't need to. Then I froze our joint accounts. Quietly. No alerts. No obvious blocks. Just safeguards. I opened new checking and savings accounts under my name only. Redirected my direct deposits. Split the utilities. Changed the passwords to my business logins and revoked her secondary admin access to the shared budgeting app she never actually used. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I saw the end coming, and I wasn't going to let it catch me unprepared. At night, I acted normal. We still shared dinner, still made small talk, still brushed our teeth side by side like everything was fine. She didn't seem to notice the shift in me. Maybe because she was too wrapped up in her own illusions. Or maybe because I'd gotten good at hiding what I now knew. She talked about her job like nothing had changed. Asked if I wanted to go hiking that weekend. Said we needed fresh air. She even sent me a TikTok about a dog doing taxes with a caption that read, "This is literally you." I laughed when I replied, emoji and all. But inside, I was already halfway gone. I don't know when it hit her that I'd stopped chasing. Maybe she never noticed. She seemed lighter in those days, more cheerful, almost relieved, like she believed the tension had passed and I was finally over it. Whatever it was, maybe she thought I was in denial, or maybe she believed her own story, that the bracelet was harmless, the dinners professional, the hotel circumstantial. But I wasn't in denial. I was documenting every calendar event, every message draft, every receipt, backed up, printed, filed. My lawyer had a folder. My cousin had a copy. My financial advisor was looped in. The net was tightening, and she had no idea, because this time I wasn't the man waiting for answers. I was the one writing the final chapter, and for once I wasn't writing it for her. I was writing it for me. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I made her lunch, asked about her day, kissed her cheek. She thought we were healing, maybe even winning. But Friday night, as she dressed for a girls' night, I left an envelope on the counter. Inside, the prenup, hotel receipts, calendar screenshot *TS, and a photo of that bracelet she didn't know I saw. I didn't stay to see her face. I drove to a cabin 2 hours away and turned off my phone. The call started by midnight. First cautious, then panicked, then angry. One voicemail stood out. "You ruined everything." But the truth was she had. I just ended it. By Monday, the locks were changed. The divorce filed. Her access revoked. The house, the one I owned, was no longer hers to walk through. She found out the hard way. The life she thought was half hers wasn't. Not anymore. She left voicemails, then letters, then silence. 8 months later, a message came, "I'm sorry. I miss you." But I didn't answer. This story wasn't hers to finish. It was mine, and I'd already turned the page.